Stocks though trading up by over 5% in bid. Quick check at how the things are panning out in Europe also. Important to watch out for the way things are looking there. A bit of weakness actually coming in. DAX itself down by 1%, FTSE 0.5% of cut, and CAC 40 also showing us 0.5% of cut. In fact, let's try and figure out what else is happening and where is this weakness coming. Nara is joining us from London. Nara, tell us how is it looking there?
Well, you know, we got a bit of a pickup in sentiment in the European markets in the afternoon yesterday after that US growth data. But today, an hour and a half into the trading day, I can tell you that we are back in the red. The Stock 600 trading lower. You know what? Its decline for this month overall actually means it's heading for its worst start to the year since 2010. Fed tapering, more of that Fed tapering, and the emerging market sell-off over the past week or so really haven't done the Stock 600 any favours. And if you look at the national equity benchmarks, most of them are declining today as well. In terms of what's happening on the macro front in Europe, well, we are looking ahead to Eurozone unemployment data coming at 10 a.m. London time, expected to show that unemployment held at a record 12.1%. So that's probably not helping sentiment either. Now, looking across the pond, we've got US consumer sentiment and consumer spending coming later. Ahead of that, the Bloomberg dollar index trading pretty flat, but you know what? The dollar's actually headed for its best January since 2010. The euro, on the other hand, poised for its first monthly loss versus the dollar since August and poised for its biggest monthly decline versus the dollar since March. Look at the London Metal Exchange. Concerns about the outlook for growth in China still weighing on sentiment there. Those industrial metals declining. Copper heading for its biggest monthly drop since June. Back to you.
Right, Nera, thanks for getting us that update there. European markets currently trading a tad bit weaker is what we're seeing in terms of developments right now. All right, so that's the way it's playing out. Getting some more clarity in terms of the fiscal deficit number as well is what is tracking right now. All right, the budget deficit is coming around about 5.42 lakh crore is what we're just picking up right now. It'll just come up on your screen regarding deficit numbers. The April-December budget deficit now reached at 5.16 is what we're talking about. Just trying, okay, it's 95.2%. That's the number you want to keep your eyes out on. The April to December budget deficit now stands at 95.2%. is what we've seen in terms of deficit figure for of the FY14 target is what it's coming at. So that's what we've picked up just coming in right now.
It's interesting, Priyank, because you know, the last time when the data came out for the month of till November, we were at about 94.3 or 7 odd %. So yes, the pace of the expenditure clearly has slowed down, or maybe the revenues have gone up. We'll wait and try and get the details of how the expenditure and revenues have really panned out. But 95.2% up till the month of December. Of course, 3 more months to go for this financial year, but as expected, the pace of the increase has slowed down, so that should be of some relief. Keeping in mind the kind of things that the government has lined up in terms of increasing or shoring up their revenues, whether it's through divestment, you know, a lot of those are still being worked out. The last year, even for BHEL, the cross-holding thing is being considered. The telecom auctions will take place. All of that will get added up in the coming few 3 months. But yes, that's the fiscal deficit target, 95.2%. That's where we've already hit for this entire year. That stands at about 5.16 trillion rupees. That's the headline figure we're getting. We'll try and get some more perspective also. Markets at this point of time, of course, still extremely quiet, almost just about 0.3% of gain coming in there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to analyze these numbers just to get a sense, because as you've been mentioning, at 95.2%, it just keeps getting closer and closer. Facing, and probably is going to become extremely difficult and crucial over the next couple of months. In fact, Sharmila Joshi from sharmilajoshi.com is also joining in right now. Sharmila, before I talk about the markets, let's get your on this number as well. When we talk about the budget deficit around about 5.16 lakh crores, which is what we're talking about roughly around 95.2% of the FY14 target.
Yeah, I think precisely what you all were just discussing, that the pace is coming down. So I think that's the positive takeaway, but still we are quite uncomfortable. I think I would say that it's any great, it's not giving me at least any great sense of cheer. But yes, I think definitely what it is implying is that the trajectory which we saw, you know, starting about last September, October, that seems to be continuing. And Therefore, it does definitely seem likely that we will end at a figure lower than what we had anticipated. So to that, from that point of view, it's a good number. But still, I think it's that way, it's still much larger than what one would like to see.
Let's also welcome in our Sreesankar, Head Institutional Equities from Prabhudas, Lilladher, who's joining in right now. Sreesankar, thanks so much for taking the time out to talk to us. Before we start talking about markets and the outlook here, just getting the macro numbers out, the April to December budget deficit is coming at around about 5.16 lakh crore, basically, which is 95.2% of the FY14 target. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, see, the challenge is to keep the fiscal deficit under control. We need to look at how they are going to control it over the next 3 months or the last quarter, and are we going to see a lot of cuts happening in terms of in order to keep this deficit under control. That's going to be key.
Just want to quickly mention the currency for you as well, because post those numbers, you got a little bit of a move coming in on the currency markets as well. Take a look at that, a little bit of a spike coming in terms of the way the currency is actually panning. Now it's started just to weaken a tad bit. You're talking of levels of roughly around 62.58, 62.59 is what we're seeing on the currency, is what it's panning out right now and the way it's playing in there. But Sreesankar, the other thoughts out here in terms of markets as well, because the last couple of days that we've seen, tremendous cuts coming in. It's not only about India, but the other global markets also saw some sharp cuts coming in. What's the strategy now that you're actually building in, at least for the medium term?
Our strategy has been more or less the same for the last better part of last 6 months. Be in defensive, be it overweight pharma, overweight IT, overweight FMCG. I don't think there is much change to it, except that we added 2 of the cyclicals or capital goods stocks into that portfolio. We continue to believe that that's a better place to be in the current environment, which is so uncertain. That's number one. Number two, the market itself, last 2 weeks, or more for that matter, the last 10 days have seen a lot of tightening, especially in the emerging markets. There have been fear about the emerging markets, what's going to happen, Chinese market slowing down, Chinese economy slowing down rather, and you also had an Argentinian peso crisis out there with a sharp devaluation. So you've actually seen a lot of Asian currencies actually going down. India in the last 1 month has been relatively better.
Right. Sharmila, give us some thoughts on how you're seeing the banking sector now. There were a lot of concerns in the last couple of days on asset quality, especially after we saw Chanda Kochhar speak about it. But the numbers that have come out today haven't been that disastrous. Like PNB gave a good set of performance. What's the outlook there?
So I think that's the surprise, because really the private banks have not been too good. I think if you look at the numbers, I mean the ICICI commentary for sure. And if you look at the numbers of an IndusInd Bank and a Yes Bank, you do see that NPA pain is beginning to become more evident in the numbers, which wasn't the case maybe 1 or 2 quarters earlier. So that catch-up game seems to have really played out on the private banking space, because I mean ultimately they are all really lending to the same sector. So some problem is likely to reflect in maybe some different kind of proportion. So the surprise has been some of these PSU banks, but I think overall as a sector, I think it's not really, if you don't have it or if you're not too overweight on it, I don't think the time is still right for you to take a very positive stand. Yes, I think valuations are looking interesting, but I think it's very clearly, I think even in the month of January, it's the sector that's underperformed the most, and that clearly shows the sentiment. So my bet would still be on the private banking space. I still think that on dips, banks like an Axis Bank or an IndusInd or a Yes Bank can be bought at these current levels. I would still be a little shy of buying PSU banks right away. Still hold on to that buy for another couple of quarters.
This has really been the interesting space, the banking sector. I mean, over the last couple of days, they've been cracking quite sharply. But I was just looking at the Bank Nifty right now, just pull that up for you. It's been holding on pretty well today, almost a 1% gain. Sri, what are your thoughts when we talk about the banking sector out here and the way the earnings have been panning out today?
And I wouldn't like to look at the earnings numbers of these banks, because that's quite misleading. So what we would love to look at is the pre-operating profit, pre-provisioning operating profit, because you can always juggle around with the numbers at the end of the day with provisioning. When we look into it, that's something which we are fairly okay with it. But at the same time, what is disturbing is the deterioration in the asset quality. And if the economy continues to remain where we are, continues to move sideways to and not a lot of growth being built in, then the chances of your continued deterioration in the asset quality is going to only increase in the near term. That's going to be a big call that you have to make. In the last few days and over the last few quarters, the PSU banks have steadily been seeing an increase in the asset quality deterioration, whereas the private sector banks has fairly, to a great extent, been insulated from that issue of deterioration in asset quality. But my thought process is, if this scenario continues over a period, then you will see even the private sector banks coming under a bit of a pressure. But within the sector, private sector banks seem to be better placed than public sector banks. And on a valuation basis, because the caning that the public sector banks have taken, public sector banks may look quite attractive, but what I'm not sure, the amount of pain or the write-downs that they will have to take, and also the amount of recapitalization most of these banks will have to take, because most of them are awfully in need of capital.
Sure. We're just running out of time. Markets have closed. Sorry for having such a short conversation today. But Sharmila, thanks for joining in our studio. Sreesankar, as always, a pleasure talking to you as well. All right, that's the kind of closing that we've picked up in terms of markets. Marginal uptick coming in as far as the way benchmark indices have panned out. Take a look at that. Sensex barely managing a positive close. Nonetheless, a couple of stocks that were on the radar. She was talking about the banking sector. SBI, 0.7%. ICICI Bank, half. Axis Bank holding on pretty well, 1% gain there. To the HDFC twins lost out, and HDFC in particular lost out quite sharply, 2.5% lower towards the end. Tata Motors also was another weak counter, 3% lower for that stock. Sun Pharma, 1%. Dr. Reddy got a little bit of a thrashing today, 0.5% cut there. Hero Moto was a little bit of a disappointment in terms of performance after the earnings that came in yesterday post-market hours. Cipla, 1% cut there. But you had some support coming in from stocks like NT, Reliance Industries. Tata Power was 3% higher. Metal counters came back. Tata Steel, Cesar Sterlite, even Hindalco for that matter closed up by nearly 1.3, 1.2% is what we noticed. ITC up around about 0.2%. NTPC and TCS were a couple of the other stocks that were on the move, along with GAIL, which was up around about 2.6% on that counter right there. Let's follow the Nifty and get a quick mention there. Now for the Nifty, we're talking of a gain of roughly around 15 to 16 points. 35 gaining, 15 odd stocks losing out. Let's get a quick mention as to where that support came in from. It was a contrarian, it was a rare occasion where you actually had the banking stock supporting today, and hence you had the Nifty actually have a little bit of a better performance in the Sensex, considering the heavy weightage out here. PNB towards the end, 7%. Bank of Baroda, 3.6%. ACC, Tata Power and BPCL all seeing some good gains. Tata Motors down 3.2%, HDFC, SIM, Asian Paints and Hero Moto were some of the losers in terms of performance today. So that's the way it panned out, 15 to 16 points higher as far as the Nifty is concerned. Well, all in all, it's been an extremely eventful week considering the kind of cuts that we've seen. The Feb series seems to have started off on a little bit of a flat note, Tanvi. Let's see what the next week holds for the markets.
The benchmark indices indeed, Priyank, in the large caps, but mid caps have actually seen quite a bit of action today. Almost 1.5% and over 1.5% gain for the mid cap index itself. Suzlon Energy is one of the stocks which is rallying quite a bit, almost 10% of gain coming in for Suzlon Energy. You've got CESC, which is showing us 8.5% of gain come in. Then you've got some of your banking names in the mid cap space. So you've got Indian Bank, which is up 8%, Indian Overseas up by 7.8%. Andhra Bank is 6.5% of gain. Syndicate Bank 6.5%. Quite a few of these banking names in the mid-cap space are actually rallying quite a bit. From the space, pull up Motherson Sumi for you. Earnings came out. Good set of earnings, but also on the back of the fact that for the last 1 week, the stock had seen quite a lot of selling. It's completely rebounded from that, 12.5% of gains coming in for Motherson Sumi. Apollo Tyres is another one from the similar space, showing us good gains of almost 4.5% for Apollo Tyres. Sharper stop before that, of course, on the back of earnings has been showing some weakness come in. So quite a bit of activity when you talk about the mid-cap space. But let's talk about that big story that broke just a while back as far as the fiscal deficit data is concerned. For the period of April to December, the deficit figure has come in at 5.16 lakh crores. We're at 95.2% of the budgeted target for FY14. We've already completed that much, but yes, the pace has slowed in the last couple of months. We were at about 94.5 watt for the last till November. It's slowed down. Just the details that were flashing on the screen. The revenue now stands at 3.51 lakh crore rupees. So that's one of the things that we've got. In fact, let's go across to Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist at Cape Ratings, who's joining us now. Madan, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Again, it's a very basic thing to start off with, but 5.2%. What do we do for the next 3 months? How do you expect it to pan out?
No, in fact, in the next 3 months, I think on the tax collection front, I don't expect any kind of a major recovery, and I think the government will be banking a lot on the capital receipts, especially on disinvestment, and to a large extent on the spectrum sale. I think that's something which is going to shore up the resources. Because we've already seen an announcement yesterday about the LPG cylinders subsidy bill, which is going to come up into the next 3 months budget. And in order to meet any kind of extra additional expenditure, I think it cannot really come through from the conventional sources of tax revenue. Therefore, the government is also very quite confident that the fiscal deficit ratio of 4.8% is not going to be breached. In fact, we're talking in terms of it being bettered, in which case I think they're going to be quite aggressive in terms of getting hold of dividends from the PSU companies, probably pushing forward the disinvestment program in a more rigorous manner, and the spectrum sale. So there are very few options for the government, and also one should realize that most of this goes on a cash basis, which means that a part of the extra subsidy could be pushed into the next year if it really came to that stage.
Madan, stay with us. I'll just come back to you, but let's first get you the breakup also of the planned, non-planned, and even the revenue side. And Anupriya is joining us now. Anupriya, you've got the table with you.
Oh, the fancy table is looking fancy actually for Mr. Chidambaram. They've done a good job for December, and I was hearing what Madan was saying as well, that some of the numbers that are coming in, that December has been a tough month, and they're trying to get to that number that Mr. Chidambaram has been saying is the red line, and he may actually go ahead and finally do 4.8. But the question is, how are they managing to do this? If you look at the total receipts, they haven't gone up very much. But if you look at what's happening to the tax revenue side of it, there's a massive jump from 3.9 lakh crores April to November. They've collected 5.17 by the end of December. So there's almost a 2 odd lakh crore coming in on the tax revenue side of it. Non-tax is completely flat. Expenditure is slowing down, and that's not a good thing. So Madan, I want to come to you with this. He may make the number, he may not make the number, point decimal here, point decimal there. But fiscal consolidation at the cost of growth, which has been talked about since last year, is this really the way to go for an economy that's sort of struggling completely right now?
No, definitely not. I think what we have really compromised on in the last 1 year, I would actually say the last 2 years, is on the quality of the fiscal deficit. See, it's one thing to say that we are achieving what we are budgeting for, but the way we go around achieving it is important. And I think there's been a lot of compromise on development expenditure, in particular on project expenditure, which covers the infrastructure sector, which has had a backlash even on private sector investment. So I think that's the kind of compromise which we have made. So none of these budgets actually seem to be growth oriented. Not really bothered about whether these numbers which are being which you're talking about are actually generating the kind of objectives which we are looking out for.
That's exactly a lot of worries that most of the economists in your community are also raising at this point. That on one hand, if you're talking about growth coming in, the only way the fiscal consolidation is being met is if you're asking for more money from the PSUs. But the bigger challenge right now, Madan, going into will be what the next government will inherit, whether it's the UPA or whatever kind of a front that may come in. Do you see that this problem actually will get more and more escalated come July when the real budget will come out, because the kind of schemes that have been announced over the last 6 months will really fructify into problems for the new government?
Yeah, in fact, I think there's going to be a dual problem out here. The first is, of course, that a spillover of certain expenditures of the current year, which will go to the next year, and as well as the fact of what you mentioned, we have these new schemes which have come through, which will be running in for the entire year when you're talking of 2014-15. The second is, of course, that we are going to of the next budget, which is going to cover only 9 months, because 3 months will be running on the vote on accounts, which means that whatever new proposals we're going to see when the next government comes to power, they will be actually having only 9 months in order to meet whatever they want to do. So I think that's going to be a major challenge for us in the next year.
Hold on, K. Harihar, the head of Treasury at First Rand Bank, also joining in. Let me just get the rupee quote up for you for a minute before we go on to him. The rupee has taken a bit of a fall. It's the day's lowest point. Yes, that's right. The rupee is at the lowest point of the day, 62.65. It almost went to the 70 mark as well. The yield's been fluctuating between 8.83 to 8.85, which is on the higher end compared to the last 2 weeks as well. Harihar, thanks for joining in. How does the deficit number look to you? There was an auction as well on the cards today. What's really happening in the money markets?
I think as far as the deficit is concerned, I think it's marginally higher than what we had as a previous month mark. But it's still at 95%. And while the number looks very close to the 100%, I think the January to March quarter, as all of us know, is a significant one in terms of inflows, which probably are of a one-off nature but are very real. And that would obviously be a combination of the dividend, the large dividend inflows that we're expecting from the PSU undertakings. The fact that the SUTI sale of Axis Bank is already cleared, is already being rolled up. And the Hindustan Zinc and the Balco sale, which again is cleared all the legal hurdles. And finally, the cross-holding, that's happening. So all these are going to be extremely large inflows. So the market continues to be very optimistic that these large inflows will help manage. And the icing on the cake will be, of course, the spectrum sales, which with the last, again, question marks, niggling question marks off, we believe that the spectrum sales would also be a good one, though part of it would be on an installment basis. So, we don't know how much of it will come in this. But the market's roughly expecting at least 20,000 crores to be upfronted on account of that. So as far as the yields are concerned, if you look at purely from a fiscal number point of view, the market still believes that that 4.8% is the red line, and probably there will still be a surprise on the upside. So that's not an issue. As for the yield going is concerned, I think that's more taking note of the fact that the Fed taper has been announced, the second one. And today, not all emerging markets, but some countries like Turkey are having a little bit of pain. The lira has dropped again substantially, and the rand is weakened marginally. So there is a little bit of worry on that count. But having said that, I think the yield will be in a range, and they'll take a cue more from inflation and the RBI's expected moves than from any big problem on the rupee.
All right, but you expect them in this particular range as well. Harihar, just a quick question: how the liquidity in the system is right now, given the fact that people are expecting a heavy demand on the advanced tax side of it also. Given the fact that that's really where the pressure comes in when the government tries to make deficit targets, where hands get tightened and more advanced tax seems to be coming in. How's liquidity in the market right now?
Very valid point. I think if you look at just today, I think we are very comfortable. The MSF window, there is enough space, etc. But going forward, just for the same reason that I mentioned that the government fiscal numbers look good, all the monies that we are talking of, which is the dividend outflows and the SUTI sale and the Balco sale, all will be liquidity getting out of the system and going back to the government. And with the last quarter going to show very substantially lesser expenditure on the part of the government, partly because they would like to conserve and partly because of the act that forbids too much of expenditure, we should see liquidity tightening definitely by starting from the second fortnight of February. And March is not going to be a nice time, because we still expect that, given the fact that the GDP seems to have bottomed out, the advanced tax payments should be substantial. The countering factor is we already seem to be working at the RBI level to address this problem by the fact that the term repo market has really come out. We've seen the 14-day and the 28-day repo. The market therefore believes that these repos will continue to be working. We have not seen longer-term repos, so you can't make a comment right now into March. But there is a very strong belief that in March we will see the same 14-day and the 28-day repo. So if you have government securities, then you're safe. If you're not, then you would have to face a little bit of tightening. And we've already seen certificate of deposit rates edging towards the 970. So we could see upside in the CD rates a little bit more. But the term repo market should keep the overall cost of funds under control.
All right. Thanks for that, Harihar, for giving us a complete perspective. That's the word coming in. So watch out for the yields as well. Supposed to be in a range, but watch out for the rupee as well. As Harihar just pointed out, the global markets are not turning favorable as well. In fact, then we were talking about this morning as well of how the EMs and the outflow We saw a lot of money coming in this month, initially with the debt market, about 3.2 billion when we checked about 22nd, 23rd of January. You check that figure now in SEBI and you'll realize that 1 billion has disappeared like that. So, you know, it comes in and goes out as fast. So clearly India is not in the fragile 5 anymore, and that's the famous term since August. But it's not looking as comfortable either.
In fact, there was just one quote that I was seeing from the IMF representative, Thomas Richardson, who's in Delhi, and he was talking about it. And he also says that they are very comfortable with the kind of forex reserves that India is sitting on at this point of time. So clearly, as far as the larger impact is concerned, we seem to be better off than what we were in May 2013. Madan, just wanted to get your sense on the kind of signs we're picking up on the economy and the growth also. We, of course, FY13's figure comes out later in the evening as far as the GDP is concerned. But how is it looking right now in terms of growth revival?
No, in fact, I think we don't really see any kind of green shoots. I think the environment seems to be fairly arid right now because we haven't seen any growth taking place in the industrial sector. And I think we are banking a lot again on the agriculture sector to provide a kind of impetus. Now, notwithstanding the fact that we had a very good Kharif harvest, we have seen that the consumption cycle really hasn't quite picked up, which means that with consumption being down and with nothing much happening on the investment side, if you look at any kind of debt which is being raised, it's not really happening. If you look at bank credit, most of it is in the retail segment. We're not seeing the manufacturing sector really borrowing funds. And now that we're talking of the government having its own constraints in order to make sure that the 4.8% line is met, it really looks like that we will not be seeing too much of economic activity in this last quarter. So whatever growth we're going to see is going to be more on case of saying that it's a statistical base effect which could come in. And we are looking at something slightly less than 5% for this year. Now, looking at 2013, in case there's any kind of a revised number which comes downwards, that will obviously provide a kind of an upward thrust for this particular year. But otherwise, I think it's more of stagnation as far as economic is concerned.
All right, Madan, thanks for that. This number is obviously looking good on paper, but as you mentioned, it's about how we are getting that is the concern. And so has been with the case with the CAD, that is really a depression or just a suppressed cap that the government has put on it, which is artificially removing, and the rupee and the yield both are not really liking what they're hearing right now, so there's a pressure coming in. But Tanvi, news flow thick and fast this afternoon after markets is shut as well. TDSAT right now coming out with some announcements on contracted spectrum.
Well, some news all around, Anu, and that's going to continue. But yes, that's the headline detail coming from TDSAT. The contracted quantum for spectrum will be 6.2 megahertz. Remember, companies like Tata Tele, Reliance Communications went to TDSAT seeking clarity on this. What they wanted was that the contracted spectrum should be 6.2 megahertz instead of 4.4 megahertz, which is what it is for some of these companies. Their claim was that as per the contract agreement earlier made with the government, they were supposed to get this much, and this was the clarity that they were seeking before they went ahead and participated in the next round of auction. And it come as a bit of a breather I'm actually interpreting this correctly. The TDSAT has said that it contracted spectrum allotment will be 6.2 megahertz. So that's something that seems to have gone in favor of for the companies. The dual take case, of course, is also pending in front of the Supreme Court. That's something that we will be watching out for, and we'll wait and get more details as far as TDSAT itself is concerned. But this is the headline that we're getting. I know this was very crucial for some of these companies to know how much of the spectrum they already hold or will be getting, and it's been a long ongoing battle whether it's 4.2 megahertz and 6.2 megahertz. Do they need to acquire that extra 2 megahertz also, or do they get that any which way?
Break that down for a layman, Tanvi, because for someone who's watching this right now and says, what does this really mean for companies going ahead? Because this has been a battle that's been ongoing for a while. They've sought clarification, they've gone back and forth with TDSAT. But what does it really mean for companies on both sides right now? What does the 6.2 megahertz mean for a company like Reliance Communication, or on the other side, Tata Tele?
What this means is that they probably don't need to get very aggressive on bidding or shell out too much, because the basic is with them. So earlier when they first got their spectrum with them, the contract actually entailed them that from 4.4 to 6.2 is something that they will be given by the government. And then there was a lot of confusion of how this is going to happen, change in policies that were being considered. So this is that clarity that TDSAT has given, that yes, you will get 6.2 megahertz for sure. And now that they have that clarity, then you can go ahead and really accordingly bid in the next round of auction. Apart from Reliance and Tata Tele, okay, that is the clarification which is coming, that Reliance and Tata Tele are not liable to get the additional spectrum. Aircel, on the other hand, may be one of the companies that does.
Aircel and Dishnet.
Yeah, so Aircel and Dishnet, according to TDSAT, will get it. And Reliance and Tata Tele agreement doesn't give them the privilege, or doesn't make them liable to get additional spectrum, because theirs was not directly squashed by Supreme Court.
And the dual tech case still doesn't have too much clarity. I think we can go across to April now.
Yeah, let's do that. Priyal, help us understand this better. For Reliance and Tata, they're not liable for additional spectrum, but Aircel is. How does this work?
Okay, so essentially, see, there were two very important cases that the Telecom Tribunal was looking into. To begin with, first, as far as contracted spectrum is concerned, where the telecom companies were and placed before the court that they should be given 6.2 megahertz as per the UASL license, that is the previous regime. There were telecom companies such as Reliance, Tata Tele, Aircel and others who had only 4.4 megahertz, and there was this ambiguity whether 4.4 megahertz is the contracted spectrum or 6.2 megahertz. The Telecom Tribunal has ruled that the contracted spectrum is 6.2 megahertz. However, this is only sounding good news for Aircel at this point in time, because the court has also said that Reliance and Tata Tele will not be liable to get this additional spectrum of 1.8 megahertz. The reason given for that is that while the dual tech licenses have not been directly looked into in the Supreme Court's 2G judgment, or that the fact is that those licenses have come under the cloud after the 2G judgment, and owing to which Reliance and Tata Tele are not liable to get the additional 1.8 megahertz spectrum, even if the contracted spectrum is 6.2 megahertz. This is as far as the contracted spectrum cases.
Yes, I was actually going to ask you about the other one also. The hearing for license extension was also at TDSAT, and we understand that TDSAT has not found any merit in that plea.
Yes, so right now, as far as the pronouncement of the judgment is concerned, the only thing that is as far as the extension of licenses is concerned, that they have not they do not accept the merits of these petitions. Remember, Vodafone, Idea, Bharti, and others had moved to the court saying that with this extension of licenses, their licenses needs to be renewed, and that entire question on the refarming of the process is what they had essentially challenged before the court. And what it really is saying is that there is no merits of the telecom companies in this order.
So, Priyal, what does that mean for some of these companies like Vodafone, Idea or Bharti if they are not really, if TDSAT doesn't really take up their plea, what is the next course of action for them?
First and foremost, see, the entire contention, let me just elaborate a little bit, is that these telecom companies have been saying, especially the whose licenses of 900 megahertz, remember the most important, the most efficient band that is coming up for renewal and coming up for the auction starting Monday, they had contested before the court saying that the government cannot take away their 900 megahertz and auction it, and their license should in fact be renewed instead of taking away their 900 megahertz. The court has held right now, in the pronouncement that happened, it has essentially said that this extension of licenses, the plea of theirs does not have any merit, which essentially means that the 900 megahertz spectrum goes on as per what the government has been saying and the TRAI has recommended. Having said so, there could be a possibility, and we do see and understand from various telecom companies, there is a whole likelihood of them moving to the Supreme Court. Now remember that it is Supreme Court is only open till 4 o'clock today. perhaps the only option before them is to go before the Chief Justice on Saturday, which is otherwise a day closed for the courts, as the auction starts from 9 a.m. on Monday, and hence, therefore, the telecom companies will have to take some sort of decision as far as how they go forward if they want to sort of protect 900 megahertz from being auctioned in just coming 24 hours.
I'm going to go back to the first case and ask you one more question. How does TDSAT judgment in terms of giving the additional spectrum to Aircel but not to Reliance and Tata Tele at this point impact the auctions which start on Monday?
See, essentially, the entire reasoning that the court gave is that, well, while they are agreeable to the telecom companies stating that 6.2 megahertz is what the government ought to give them once they took the license, the UASL license earlier, the fact that Reliance Telecom and Tata Tele's licenses have come under the cloud after the 2G judgment, while the 2G judgment does not specifically say anything about the dual tech players, and that is also a separate case that is there before the Supreme Court. The fact of the matter is that it come under the cloud, and therefore the additional spectrum of 1.8 megahertz cannot be granted to Reliance Telecom and Tata Tele.
All right, thanks for putting all of that in perspective and updating us on both of those very crucial cases. I'm going to just go through them one more time. As far as the contracted spectrum is concerned, TDSAT has said that Reliance and Tata Tele UASL license is not directly caused by Supreme Court, and so as of now, they are not liable to get additional spectrum. That there is a dual technology case which is pending before Supreme Court, and there is a lot of confusion regarding the approval of dual technology, which has come under cloud at this point. On the other hand, Aircel and DishNet can actually get additional spectrum. That's what TDSAT has ruled. Let's get some more perspective going. Meet Malhotra, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, is joining us. Mr. Malhotra, if you could just hear what I was recapping in terms of the contracted spectrum judgment that's come from TDSAT, how are you viewing this? Because for two of these companies, they're not really getting that additional 2 odd megahertz of spectrum that they were counting on.
Why do you say that? In fact, because of the judgment, they will get that spectrum. They were all preparing to go into auction because this was a contracted right. It was accrued to the company way back in 2009. The DOT never took a decision on that application till 2012 when they said that there has been a policy change now and that you have to bid for the spectrum. The case of SL and DWL before the TDSAT was precisely that, that you cannot now ask the company, the competitors of whom got 6.2 as a matter of right, to now bid for the 1.8 when others got it at the same terms and conditions as the US agreement says. So, in fact, to that extent, the companies, both these companies' position has been vindicated by the TDSAT, and they are now liable to get the 1.8, which had so far been illegally denied to them.
Yes, for ASL and DishNet, indeed, although I'm assuming Reliance and Tata Tele still go and seek more further clarification. Mr. Malhotra, the other case, of course, was on the license extension where Vodafone, Idea, all of them were seeking challenging DOT's decision on the refarming and seeking a license extension. That plea has right now been rejected by TDSAT. That's going to have a massive impact on the auctions, is it?
All these three cases, I dare say, would have had a massive impact on the auction. And I think the government have not done their homework sufficiently carefully, nor do they seem to have a genuine mid-long-term policy on telecom. The government seems to specialize in knee-jerk reactions and take one decision today and another 6 months down the line. They react to external environment. They have no policy of their own, and this confusion is entirely of the government's own creation.
All right, Mr. Malhotra, we leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us with some of your perspective as far as these two big decisions are concerned. Coming in from TDSAT, we are still awaiting more details as far as the second concerned on license extension. But yes, CDSAT has said that they find no merit in the telecoms petition seeking extension of license. Now remember, that was Vodafone, Idea, Bharti, Loop, all of them had challenged the Department of Telecom's decision on license renewal or refarming. That saying that the 900 megahertz cannot be taken away from them and that their license ought to be renewed. For several of these companies, this license actually expires in 2014, and for some of them it's 2015. And whether they would have gotten an extension or would have decided their participation in the upcoming auctions, which now makes it difficult, like Priyal was also pointing out, that they will have to take a call that if this is TDSAT's viewpoint, what should they really be doing on Monday morning? So quite a bit of action to watch out for on Monday morning in the telecom industry. But for now, it's a wrap on Countdown. Thank you so much for watching.
You got to be really persistent and a little aggressive to really get things done. My father's quite a perfectionist in that sense. Just getting it right to the T. I often like to unleash my creative skills. I don't let the negative thoughts really bother me. I often felt that, you know, in India, I mean, it was a very unorganized sector, and I think people also complained about, you know, good writing service. In terms of growth and expanding, we are looking at maybe 100 stores by 2015. I guess money is more of a report card. Just seeing a positive change and actually seeing your dreams realized, it definitely gives you a high then, and it makes you want to prove yourself even stronger.
Presented by Renault. Drive the change.
The Sensex is a daily diary of the Indian dream. I'm Ramesh Damani, and I have been associated with the BSE all my life. Come, feel the financial pulse of the nation.
S&P BSE Sensex, India's index, the world tracks.
Uttar Pradesh government is helping their inter-pass poor girl students for their further education with Kanya Vidyadhan of Rs 20,000. Till date, more than 6 lakh students have benefited from this scheme. For more information, contact concerning District Inspector of Schools. Issued in public interest by the Department of Information and Public Relations, Uttar Pradesh.
Stay ahead with the most preferred English business news channel. Bloomberg TV India is the #1 English business news channel with the highest time spent per viewer.
Hello and welcome. You're watching the news on Bloomberg TV India. We're a part of the world's largest financial news network. I'm Ashwin Raghunath, and these are the top headlines coming to you at this hour. The fiscal deficit soars to 95.2% of the target. April to December fiscal deficit comes in at close to 5.2 lakh crore rupees. Markets witnessed the worst weekly fall in 5 months. On Main Street, the rupee trades weak, currently at 62.74 to the dollar. The Telecom Tribunal finds no merits in telcos' arguments for license extension on contracted spectrum. The tribunal holds the level at 6.2 megahertz, but differences between GSM players and dual tech operators. NTPC rejects Delhi government's plea not to stop power supply to BSES Yamuna Power for defaulting on payments. Warns of snapping supply if payment isn't made today. The US FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, downgrades Indian aviation safety ratings from the top to the second category, a move which could affect expansion of flights by Indian carriers to the United States. Well, fiscal deficit for the April to December period has soared to 95.2% of the government's target. Now, deficit has come in at 5.16 lakh crore rupees. Anupriya Nair is standing by with more. Over to you, Anu.
Hi there, Ashwin. The number itself is looking good. It's only about 95% of the total target. Remember, we're already at 94% by November. So most analysts expected to be a little higher and a little more worried. The government's managed to keep it under control. And how is the larger question? We were just talking to some economists right ahead before you came on to the show. And they're mostly saying it's because of increased revenues. And you've seen a massive surge in tax revenues going up. And they've got 3 months to go. 4.8 is the sort of red line that Mr. Chidambaram is saying that he will maintain. And if you look at the figures right now at about 5.1 lakh crores, it looks like they're going to make it. Planned expenditure has seen a bit of cut. Non-planned spending has seen a little bit of slowdown as well. At 5.42 lakh crores, that's the limit that the government has set for the entire year. With 3 more months to go, we've already finished off 5.1 lakh crores. So what's left in the government's kitty at this point? Well, there are divestments yet to be done, interim dividends which have started to come in. And more importantly, they're going to see advance tax coming in. And typically, the last quarter of the fiscal sees a higher amount of advance tax, which sort of boosts the kitty up and subsidy payments get pushed out. So as of right now, there's just the pure numbers as we see them. Don't look bad for the economy. But economists are sort of sounding out the red alarm, saying it's how the government's doing it, which is not good for growth because they're cutting back on expenditure, and the tax axe is getting heavier.